says it's the end of time, and the Mississippi River, she's a going dry. The interest is up and the stock market's down, and you're only getting mugged if you go downtown. I live back in the woods, you see, a woman and the kids and the dogs and me. I got a shotgun, a rifle, and a four-wheel drive, and a country boy can survive. Country folks can survive. I can plow a field all day long. I can catch catfish from dusk till dawn. We make our own whiskey and our own smoke too. Ain't too many things these old boys can't do. Grow good old tomatoes and homemade wine, and country boy can survive. Country folks can survive. Because you can't starve us out and you can't make us run. But with the old boys raised on shotgun, we say praise and we say man, if you ain't into that, we don't give a damn. We came from the West Virginia coal mines and the Rocky Mountains and the western skies. And we can skin a buck, we can run a trot line, and a country boy can survive. Country folks can survive. I had a good friend in New York City. He never called me by my name, just Hillbilly. My grandpa taught me how to live off the land, and his taught him to be a businessman. He used to send me pictures of the Broadway nights, and I'd send him some homemade wine. But he was killed by a man with a switchblade knife. For $43, my friend lost his life. I'd love to spit some beach nut in that dude's eyes and shoot him with my old 45, cause a country boy can survive. Country folks can survive. Cause you can't stop us out and you can't make us run, but when the old boy raised on shotgun, we say praise, we say man, if you ain't into that, don't give a damn. We're from North California and South Alabama. Skin a buck and run a trot line, and a country boy can survive. Country folks can survive. Country boy can survive. Country folks can survive.
Minutes with Merck, Emerging Culture, Politics, and Faith. I'm your host, Greg Merck, here on the Next Gen USA. I'm a Christian American, heterosexual, pro-life, right-wing, staunch 2A, free-market conservative Republican. A former naval aviator, former Air Force pilot, former Republican candidate for Congress, and now I live in the world of politics and finance. For the next hour, we are going to cover the stories of the day. We will pierce the veil of deceit, deception, smash through the facade of media narrative to get to the real truth of the matter, why things are happening, and what we expect to happen. We will examine it all through the lens of a Christian conservative worldview. So thanks for joining us here on the Next Gen USA with Minutes with Merck. And we're going to start off with the headlines. Of course, big headline is Trump's back on Facebook and Instagram. And I want to play one of his latest campaign ads. He's not on as Donald J. Trump. He is on as a Trump war room. Perhaps maybe he'll come on as Donald Trump later. I don't know. But he does have the Truth Social thing, and there is obviously his own conflict of interest. He's invested in Truth Social, but he does need Facebook. He does need Twitter and in Instagram, and I think he will eventually come back on them in one form or fashion. And like I say, he's on Twitter already with the Trump War Room. And we're going to get that in a minute. Big news out of California. The left coast, of course, is the new wealth tax move. This is a machination of the governor out there, Newsom, and the assemblyman, a radical leftist assemblyman named Alex Lee. He proposed a bill, and in the bill he says that the working class has shouldered the tax burden for too long. The ultra-rich are paying nothing by hoarding their wealth through assets, and it's time to end that. What they're talking about is taxing your wealth, and even if you move out of the state. And what they've done is to work with 8 other states just like them, of course, deep blue states, Hawaii, Washington, Minnesota, Illinois, New York, Connecticut, Maryland, of course, the leftist states. And if you move around in any of those states, you will have to pay this wealth tax. So even if you leave the state, you will not escape these state wealth taxes, which really makes very little sense at all, because there's 42 other states there that will not comply with this. At least I know the state of Florida will never do that. The state of Texas will never do that. The state of Tennessee will never do that. These are many states. Wyoming will never have a wealth tax. South Dakota will never have a wealth tax. And these are the states that people are moving anyway from these left-wing states. So I don't know what kind of message they're sending, but if they want to continue to force the wealthiest people in their states to flee their states, then just continue to do what they're doing. But what gets me is, this Assemblyman Lee and the governor out there, Newsom, they really have no basis in fact that somehow the ultra-rich are paying very little, according to him, little to nothing, and hoarding their wealth through assets. It's time to end that. So when we talk about assets, we're talking about property, we're talking about artwork, cars, you name it, and all over the world, they're going to audit your worth of everything that you own. Even your sterling silver will be included in your wealth. Now, I frankly don't know how they're going to how they could possibly enforce that and account for that. I mean, they're going to need another 87,000 tax workers in their states alone just to audit everybody's net worth and all of their assets. It's really another asinine policy. But again, the old formula, my old template for the radical left, blank is never about blank. It's always about fundamental change. So this tax structure is not about creating equality through the states. It's about fundamental change. And that fundamental change is what I always say is controlling the masses through redistribution of wealth. And this is just another thing. But they need to check the facts about who's paying their fair share. Because in 2022, the top 1% of wage earners, top 1%, paid 42.3% of all the taxes. 42.3% by the top 1% alone. The top 50%, so that's the top half of the United States of America wagers, 97.7%. 97.7%. So that means the bottom 50 paid 2.3%. So what is this idea that the ultra rich are paying little to nothing, and that those, when the top 50 is paying 97.7. In the top 1%, close to half of all the taxes paid for by tax. This is just all nonsense. It's obvious who really is shouldering the burden, and it's ultimately the middle class and the wealthy who are clearly paying way more than what you would call as their fair share. When you tax people to death, all they're going to do is escape that death through finding ways to work around the tax codes. So they need to simplify the tax code. I've always been in favor of a flat tax, but we know that that's not going to come. But that is the fairest kind of tax. But there's no question we need serious tax reform, and we need to decrease the burden of taxpayers, especially on the middle class, because that's the engine of America. But I'm not going to hold my breath waiting for that coming. The next headline, of course, is what we're now doing. Joe Biden changing, his ways again, like the left always does. He's now going to send Abrams tanks to the Ukraine. He's supposed to send, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 of these tanks. I'm not quite sure how many. I guess there was the Leopard 2 tanks are going to come from Germany. A total of 321 tanks are coming from the West, whether it's the Abrams West. And, it's really kind of interesting because we don't really know how they're going to deploy these tanks. These are not simple operating 1950s, 60s tanks. These are modern, and I listened to the media talk about in the Biden administration, representatives talk about how they're going to be trained and they're going to be able to operate these. They're not going to be. As a matter of fact, we've already heard from soldiers on the ground. We gave them special range-finding lasers to use. And this is what one of the Ukrainian sergeants said. He described it as like getting an iPhone 13 and only being able to make phone calls. So in other words, something pretty simple as a laser finding, a range finder, a laser, and these sophisticated binoculars that are not that sophisticated, they can't even operate them. But to them, they're very sophisticated. So now you're talking about Abrams tanks, and you're talking about Leopard tanks. And oh, by the way, who's going to, we don't have, it's not like calling the DMV or any government information line where they ask you what language. They give you like 5 or 6 different languages to pick from. Okay, our tanks aren't made that way. They're all in English, all right? And the German tanks, they're all in German. And wherever your stuff is made, that's the language it's put in. So nobody talks about that. If you ever been in a tank or you ever been in a piece of military equipment, all the buttons and switches are in English. So I hope that all of these Ukrainian soldiers know how to read English very well. So this is all just more nonsense. Not to mention the fact that these tanks are extremely heavy. You're talking like 58, 59, 60 tons, 60. I think the Leopard 2 is a 60-ton tank. Now, considering the fact that the Russians have bombed just about every major supply route and bridge, I don't think they want to be driving a 60-ton tank across a bridge. So what they're going to have to do is bring these kind of makeshift bridges. Are they going to bring the kind of floating bridges that we have in the United States? So they can't just get the tanks because they're not going to be able to deploy them and cross rivers with them. You're not going to drive these things over damaged bridges. They'll collapse the bridges and they'll all plummet to their death. So it's just one thing after another that we just keep sending the stuff and sending the stuff. And the fact is, the Biden administration has zero strategic objective. They have no plan for peace. Zero. Anytime you go to war, you have to first count the costs. Out of my 21 years in the military, I did 1 year in a staff job in South Korea. And I was part of the group that wrote the O Plan. And what the O Plan does is it sets out a strategic objective, and then you lay out these tactical objectives, and then each tactical task to accomplish the tactical objectives, which ultimately will accomplish the singular strategic objective. We have none of that in Ukraine. So we're just crisis managing, sending more. Now Zelensky wants F-16s. We just keep throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what's going to stick. And we just can't do this. And you think about it. One of the things that helps our gross domestic product, amongst other things like companies like Boeing, McDonnell Douglas, and Raytheon, and all these, is military sales. They make billions of dollars in military sales. That's part of it. It not only helps the United States and us being able to maintain our military forces at optimal strength, but it also helps our allies overseas. And we sell billions of dollars worth of equipment to foreign countries. We sell them F-16s, we sell them F-15s, we sell them various Patriot systems, various missile systems. We sell billions of dollars worth of military equipment to foreign countries. Well, apparently none of that applies with Ukraine. So if you go to war, you don't ever have to invest one dime in your own country in buying your equipment, because all you have to do is lobby Congress and just make demands and talk about how you need the world's help, and if you believe in freedom, you'll help, and if you don't believe in freedom, you won't help. All you have to do is basically con the world, and they'll come to your beck and call and provide you with all this military equipment, because that's exactly what Zelensky's doing. Remember, this is one of the most corrupt nations in the world. This is a nation who knows why they gave up really gave up their nuclear weapons to Russia. They didn't have to do that, but they've mismanaged their country for years, and now it's our problem and it's Europe's problem. And we are bailing them out with continuing with no strategic objective and continuing to send them equipment. I think it's a huge mistake. We cannot give them another dime or another piece of equipment unless we have a plan for peace. We do that with our own in our own foreign policy, and why we're completely neglecting to do it over there is beyond me. But again, this is an administration that has no clue. This is a Defense Department that really has been hijacked by the State Department. And I've said this many times. When you look at the withdrawal in Afghanistan, and people say, well, how? You mean a Lance Corporal in the Marine Corps would not have orchestrated that disastrous withdrawal? You know, anybody in the military, even the lowest E1 would understand the value of having an air base that's outside the city. And yet we gave up the Bagram Air Base and kept the one in the city. All huge mistakes. And well, how does this happen? How does the military happen? Well, here's how it happens. When the Department of Defense policy is basically set by the State Department, and you've got the kind of bozos that work in the State Department, these people are career bureaucrats. They know nothing about the military, especially in this administration. They come up with a plan like this. It's in their mind politically correct. They have no sense of strategy in their mind. They don't understand war and military. All they understand is liberal think tank policy. And these are the kind of misfits. You know, if you remember the redheaded girl who used to be the press secretary, I remember her name now, but this kind of, and they might be as dumb as that Jean-Pierre, but probably not as dumb, probably intelligent like the last one, but completely clueless. You know, ever learning, but never able to come to a knowledge of the truth. Completely clueless on foreign policy and strategic military policy. And that's how you get a disastrous withdrawal like Afghanistan. And these are the same people that are setting policy, as well as the fact that, you know, General Austin, he was not picked because he is a military mastermind. He's not the Secretary of Defense because he's a military mastermind. You know, he checked all the politically correct boxes for this administration. So we have one disastrous foreign policy after another, and we're just making it worse. And it's really prolonging the agony of this war. And what's even more dangerous is it's pushing us closer to what really could be a World War III. If Vladimir Putin thinks his back is really against the wall, you know, once he starts launching small nuclear weapons, then, you know, all bets are off. And every day that goes by, and every piece of equipment and blank check that we send to Ukraine gets us one step closer. Now, I'm not suggesting that we should just back off because we're afraid of Putin. No, because like I've always said, as Reagan said, we get peace through strength. If you have, you know, we're trying to work from way behind, though. You know, you can't exemplify strength now. This administration cannot do it. It will not do it, but it's not capable of really showing any kind of strength. So we're working from, well, playing way back catch up. But the least they can do is get some smart people in the war planning offices and set a strategic objective and goal and put it in Zelensky's face and say, this is the way it's going to work. We can't allow this guy, who is just, you know, in my opinion, not much more than a con man. I get it. He wants to stay alive, but the world is a very dangerous place. The United States of America cannot arm and cannot fight for every single person, you know, all 7 billion people on the earth. We cannot fight for them. We cannot arm all of them, and we certainly cannot give them all welfare, just come on to the United States. Okay, we're trying that, and it's not working. So we have to present Zelensky with a strategic objective and say, this is what you have to accept. It may mean giving up Crimea or some areas that Russia already had, but the fact is we're doing nothing of the sort. We're just allowing this guy who's trying to stay alive, to continue to ask for more and more and more weapons, prolonging the agony. And really, it's hurting all of Europe, because Russia is, using energy to punish the European people. It is a huge mess. But this is what happens when you have egregious incompetence running the country. And things had better change very quickly, because I'll tell you, once this winter ends and the nicer weather starts coming forth, you're going to see Russia launching a whole new offensive into the Ukrainian areas, and it's not going to be a pretty picture. There is another thing in the headlines. It's something I've actually was talking about last month with my boy. It's called ChatGPT. Some of you know that. And this is artificial intelligence. You essentially can have this thing write you a term paper. You can have it do an introduction. As a matter of fact, I could ask it for a conservative introduction to a podcast. And it would literally write me, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs. And it would be pretty good. It's all part of this AI. And of course, Congress now is considering regulating ChatGPT. Students in colleges are using it. High school students are using it. And it's one more step toward really the laziness and the mental laziness of our culture, and certainly our youth. We don't spell anymore because we have autocorrect. Now we're not going to write papers anymore. We're not going to think, because we're just going to go into AI. But this is something that was addressed in Davos, the Davos dimwits, the World Economic Forum, and they love this kind of thing. Matter of fact, they think that artificial intelligence and this whole transhumanism thing is going to be great for people. Very dangerous. Next week, I'm going to talk about that specifically. Particularly, they talk about wearables. They're going to access brain waves, not going to be wearables. But again, we look at everything through a Christian worldview on this show. So I'm going to take the book of the Revelation, and specifically chapter 13. And we're going to talk about what John wrote when he was exiled on the island of Patmos. So that's going to come up next week. So hopefully you'll be with us on that. We're also going to talk about what's going to happen tomorrow with the bond markets and the Federal Reserve. That's all next week. But again, we're going to get back to the headlines today. Iowa, I liked hearing what Iowa's doing. Of course, that's Huckabee, not Huckabee, she's Arkansas. But Iowa has passed a school choice. And that means that you're going to be able to get so much money from the state to choose the school that you want to go to. And that's going to hold really schools in the state of Iowa accountable. And it's something that ought to be passed in Florida, although Florida does have some great programs. They do have things like various corporations that will give for schools, private school scholarships that you can access if you're below a certain economic standard. And it's school choice is definitely key. But of course, the educators and the unions are going to push back on that. But that's why I want to talk a little bit about what Trump has done in his latest ad, or what he purports to do. I think what he's talking about education, it's going to not replace the border, because his border message of the border is noteworthy today, maybe even more so, because the border is a worse mess now than it was even in 2016 when Trump came into office. So he's not going to totally abandon that, but he did. That's how he kind of made his bones. We're talking about the border, the people who come across the border. Well, now I think one of the big hot topics is going to be education. And he had a really outstanding ad on his war room on the Twitter. And I'm going to play it now so that you can watch
the left-wing gender insanity being pushed on our children is an act of child abuse. Chemical, physical, and emotional mutilation of our youth. On day one, I will revoke Joe Biden's cruel policies on so-called gender-affirming care. Ridiculous. A process that includes giving kids puberty blockers, mutating their physical appearance, and ultimately performing surgery on minor children. Can you believe this? I will sign a new executive order instructing every federal agency to cease all programs that promote the concept of sex and gender transition at any age. I will then ask Congress to permanently stop federal taxpayer dollars from being used to promote or pay for these procedures, and pass a law prohibiting child sexual mutilation in all 50 states. It'll go very quickly. I will declare that any hospital or healthcare provider that participates in the chemical or physical mutilation of minor youth will no longer meet federal health and safety standards for Medicaid and Medicare and will be terminated from the program immediately. Furthermore, I will support the creation of a private right of action for victims to sue doctors who have unforgivably performed these procedures on minor children. The Department of Justice will investigate Big Pharma and the big hospital networks to determine whether they have deliberately covered up horrific long-term side effects of sex transitions in order to get rich at the expense of vulnerable patients, in this case, very vulnerable. We will also investigate whether Big Pharma or others have illegally marketed hormones and puberty blockers, which are in no way licensed or approved for this use. My Department of Education will inform states and school districts that if any teacher or school official suggests to a child that they could be trapped in the wrong body, they will be faced with severe consequences, including potential civil rights violations for sex discrimination and the elimination of federal funding. As part of our new credentialing body for teachers, we will promote positive education about the nuclear family, the roles of mothers and fathers, and celebrating rather than erasing the things that make men and women different and unique. I will ask Congress to pass a bill establishing that the only genders recognized by the United States government are male and female, and they are assigned at birth. The bill will also make clear that Title IX prohibits men from participating in women's sports, and we will protect the rights of parents from being forced to allow their minor child to assume a gender which is new and an identity without the parents' consent. The identity will not be new, and it will not be without parental consent. No serious country should be telling its children that they were born with the wrong gender, a concept that was never heard of in all of human history. Nobody's ever heard of this, what's happening today. It was all when the radical left invented it just a few years ago. Under my leadership, this madness will end. Thank you very much.
So there you have Donald Trump's latest. And let me fix this here. The thing that people love about Donald Trump is how he gets right to the point. He doesn't mince words. Anybody's going to run for who's going to run for president, they're going to have to do that.